Hi there. This tutorial will cover the basics of using the Godot editor. Let's get started. I have Godot 4 downloaded and installed on my computer, and now I've just opened the application for the first time. You'll see we'll be presented with the project manager, and you might get this confirmation box asking if you want to open the asset library. That's a good place to start if you're new and want to check out some of the example projects. For this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and cancel that because we're going to create our own project. Let's go ahead and create a new project. The Create New Project dialog will appear, and here we want to choose our project name and the path where we will save the project. Go ahead and select a project name, and then we want to choose a path. So I'm just going to create a new folder here within my user. And then finally we need to choose a renderer. For this tutorial we can just stick with the / renderer. If you know you're targeting mobile, then in the future you might want to choose the mobile option. Let's go ahead and click Create and Edit. Now the main editor will open for Godot, and you'll be presented with the 3D edit screen. Since we're going to focus on 2D for the purpose of the tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the 2D tab here at the top. So you have 2D and 3D, and then there's also script and asset lib. Let's go ahead and switch to 2D. The first thing we'll start with is movement. To move around your main screen here, simply scroll up or down. That will pan on the screen. You can also scroll side to side, which will pan side to side. Another option is to hold the space bar and then click and drag, and that will allow you to pan in any direction. And then finally, you can also use the pan tool, which is this hand icon right here, or by pressing the G key. So then once the pan tool, you can again click and drag to pan around the screen. Let's switch back to the selection tool. You can do that by pressing the arrow icon or by pressing Q. You'll see several panels on the screen, each with its own functionality. We'll start by covering the one on the left here, the scene panel. Each scene that you work with will be displayed up here across the top as tabs, and then the nodes of the scene that you have selected are shown in the scene panel here. The import panel is used to change properties of imported resources, such as images or textures. The file system panel shows the current files in your project. So this will be scenes once you create them and save, any images that you're using in your project, as well as scripts and any other resource files. To the right of your screen, you'll see the inspector. The inspector is used to edit properties of an individual node. The node panel will be used to connect and disconnect to signals of a node. And then finally, the history panel is used to be able to view the current history and go back if you need to. Along the bottom of the screen are a few more panels. The first one is the output panel. This output panel shows the output from the editor as it's running, as well as when you run your game, you'll see any output here. You then have the debugger, which can be used to debug your game, and it comes with a suite of tools as well to dig in and figure out any issues or bugs in your game. The search results tab, the audio tab, which is used for editing audio, the animation tab, which is used for working with animation, and finally the shader tab, which is used for working with shaders and editing shaders. Let's go ahead and close this panel. Now we will create our first node for our scene. You can see in our scene editor here that we have 4 choices: a 2D scene, a 3D scene, a user interface scene, or choosing some other node as our root node. Since we are working on a 2D game, let's go ahead and just select the 2D scene. As you can see, this created a node 2D as our root node within our scene. You can now see that we also have a set of properties in the inspector, which can be edited if needed. Now let's go ahead and create an additional node as a child of this node 2D. The first node we're going to create is a sprite node, which will be used to display an image on the screen. You can create a new node by clicking on the plus icon here, or by typing Control A on Windows or Command A on Mac. Go ahead and create a new node. This will open the Create New Node dialog. Here we want to search for Sprite. And again, since we're working with a 2D game here, we're going to choose Sprite 2D. Click Create. We now have a child node of our node 2D. And you can see here on the right for the inspector that we have some additional properties specifically for the Sprite 2D. The first one being the texture. This is where we will add our image so we can actually see an image for a sprite. We already have the Godot icon here in our file system, so let's go ahead and select that icon and drag it into the texture property. We can now see that the icon has shown up on the screen in our main view here. I'm going to zoom in some so it's see it easier. And you can grab that icon, you can drag it around and place it wherever you want in our view here. So that is the quickest and easiest way to move around a sprite. You can also use various tools to move it. The first tool is the movement tool. You can select this tool here in this toolbar or by pressing the W key. You can then click and drag along the axis of movement that you wish to move, so either in the X-axis or the Y-axis, and that will lock it to just moving in that direction. You can of course still grab the sprite and move in any direction. Next is rotation. You can select the rotate tool right beside the movement tool or by pressing E. You can now click and rotate the icon. And I went ahead and just undid that movement with Control Z or Command Z. Finally, you can scale the sprite by using the scale tool, again right beside the rotate tool, or by pressing S. And now you can scale in a single dimension by dragging along the axis, or you can click on the icon and scale in both dimensions. If you hold Shift while dragging, then it will lock it to keep the aspect ratio as you scale. Now, if you look at the properties on the right, if we go to the Transform tab, you'll see that it has detected that there are changes from the original values. This is because we manually changed them using these various tools. You can also directly change each of those properties here within the inspector. So we can change the position, we can change the rotation, and we can change the scale and the skew. You can also revert back to the defaults, so I can revert the scale back to the original dimensions. I'll quickly show the Node tab here. The Node tab has all of the signals of the node, and then the History tab has all of the history of what you've been working through, so you can go back quickly and easily to previous iterations if need be. Next, I'm going to change the name here of the root node to player. So I just double clicked on the root node, which allowed me to edit the name, and I changed that to player. Now I'm going to save this scene. So you can go up and do File Save, or you can do Control S or Command S. And then I'm going to choose the name for a scene. It went ahead and selected the root node name, which is why I changed that name first. But you can name it whatever you'd like here. I'm going to stick with player. Let's save that. You will now see the player.tscene inside of our file system. Now we want to create a new scene, that way we can add our player scene to it. To create a new scene, you can either click the plus button up here beside of our player scene, or you can go File, New Scene, or by just doing Control N or Command N. We will once again need to choose a root node. Let's go ahead and select 2D scene. Now that we've created our new scene, let's go ahead and rename the root node here. I'm going to rename it to main. Now we want to add our previous scene, the player scene, to our main scene. You can do that by clicking the link button here, which will allow you to instance a new scene as a child. You can also drag in the scene from the file system doc, or you can type Shift, Control A, or Shift, Command A. Now you can choose one of your scenes to add as a child. I'm going to select the player scene and click Open. You can see this added the player scene as a new node under our main node, and that it now shows up in our main view. Let's go ahead and save this scene with Control S or Command S. Again, I'm going to keep the default name of main and click Save. The last thing we want to do is run our main scene, which will run our game. In the top right of the editor, you'll see we have a play button, a pause button, a stop button, as well as some additional running options. Let's click the main play button, which will attempt to run our game. Since this is the first time running our game, we will need to select the main scene. We are already currently on our main scene, so let's go ahead and select the current one. If you are not on your main scene tab, then you will want to click select and choose the main scene. Let's select the current. You can see that our game has now run and that we're presented with a window with our icon in it, just like we see within the editor. So that covers the basics of using the editor to get you started with using Godot. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button and subscribe for future videos.